Ayin Tesamet Beis. We're in the middle of discussing the sizes of objects when you transfer them from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. But in this Amud, it's going to get involved in which type of parchments are kosher for Tefillin, Mezuzah, and Sefer Torah. And because we're going to discuss the minimal size of this type of parchment, that type of parchment, and it depends what it's usually used for, Tefillin, Mezuzah, or Sefer Torah. Now, in today's day, not just today, but even in the time of the Rishonim, there was one type of parchment. There is one type of parchment. You take the skin, you shave it off a lot from the bottom, you smooth it a bit from the top, and you're left with the parchment that you could write on. Obviously, it's a whole process. There's one part of the process that we don't do, which we mentioned last year, this type of, what do you call it, gual nuts juice. You don't have that. You don't do that. And Tosfos says that the point is that we replace it with other things. In other words, we do the same good job. It doesn't have to be done specifically with those things, with those nuts, but just we do the job which is usually done from those nuts. But it's one piece of skin that we just smooth it down from both sides, mainly from the bottom, a drop from the top, and we're left with the parchment. In the time of the Gemara, there are three types. There was Gevil, Klaf, and Duchsustus.
When you said top and bottom, you mean
the outside part where the hair was, so when they shave off the hair, it smooths a bit, takes a small, insignificant layer, as we'll see, from the outside of the skin, and then from the inside, they smooth it down a lot, and basically they remove a lot from the skin inside. So in the time of the Gemara, they had three types: Gevil, Klaf, and Duchsustus. Gevil was they took the whole skin and they just prepared it, whatever they needed to do. They left the whole original thickness of the skin. Klaf was afterwards they would take it and divide it in half. In other words, either they made Gevil with the whole skin, or instead of shaving it down from the bottom and smoothing it from the top, they cut it in half. And they prepared both halves to write on them. The outside half was called klaf, that's like the peel that you peel off. And the inside part was called duchsustus. Sustus means meat, and duch means place, the place of the meat. It's the skin which is closer to the meat. So we'll see, the Brises it says, in Mishnayos it says, in Brises it says that Gevil is used for Sefer Torahs, Klaf is used for Tefillin, and Duchsustus used for Mezuzah. So Gevil again is the full parchment, not divided. Klaf is when it was cut in half, and Duchsustus, and the outside part, Duchsustus is when it's cut in half, the inside part. Now, are we only allowed to use those parts for Sefer Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzah? If that would be the case, we would have a big question on the kashrus of all of our Tefillin and Mezuzahs for Sefer Torah, whichever one of them. Because we have one type of parchment, which is somewhere in between. It's not the full skin, it's not the inside part for sure. It's the outside part with a bit shaved off from the top. So what do we have? And how can we use it for all of them? So in our Gemara, we'll go a bit back and forth. And according to the Maskana of the Gemara, we'll be able to understand it, because really the klaf is kosher for all of them. And today, basically what we have is called klaf, because mainly what you have is the outside half, and that can be kosher for all of them. Now, our Gemara will be a very typical Gemara, which means it'll be convincing you very much this side and that side, and then I'll take it all back. In other words, as we're going along, don't get too caught up on the Hasbara we have, because he's trying to analyze it, trying to see if this particular side makes sense, and bringing all the proofs and explanations. And only at the end when we have to explain, otherwise we'll turn the whole thing upside down. So just follow along. It's thought of Torah. It's trying to explain to you why we can't say a particular side until we come to the conclusion. So he starts off with a quote from the Mishnah that klaf, the outside half of the skin, what's the minimum that's useful? The size of one parsha of tefillin. because klaf is used for tefillin parshas, and in the shorosh you have each parsha on a separate parchment, and the smallest parsha is Shema. So the size that you could write just the Shema till be Shonecha, that's the size for klaf. Klaf, just in the beginning, klaf kedei on Aidas Amud Beis, klaf kedei lichtei v'lo parsha ktana, klaf the size that you could write the smallest parsha, which is Shema. V'raminu, we have a contradiction on this Mishnah from a Braisa. In the Braisa it says, klaf viduch sustus, both types of half skin, the outside and the inside, kedei lichtei v'lo mezuzah. The size is of our mezuzah, which is 2 parshas. Shema and V'hoyim Shemoya. How come? How come our Mishnah says that it's enough that it's the size of tefillin? Which also, the truth is, the Braisa has to be understood logically. Why? If you couldn't write tefillin on klaf, why does it need to be the size of a mezuzah? Okay. Says the Gemara, no, when we say mezuzah there, we don't mean mezuzah. We mean my mezuzah should be tefillin. The parchment of tefillin, we could give a nickname mezuzah. I'm not sure what the Gemara meant, whether it meant like this, klaf and the chsusus, each one for the mezuzah which is fit for them. Klaf for the tefillin mezuzah, and the chsusus for the mezuzah. Could be that pshat, I'm not sure. But either way, the klaf can be used for mezuzah. Which mezuzah? We don't mean mezuzah, we mean the tefillin mezuzah. Says the Gemara, the tefillin mezuzah, we call the parchment in the tefillin a mezuzah since when? Says, yeah, we do use that as a nickname. V'hatan, you have a proof for this. It says, Ritzu is tefillin ima tefillin, mitam is esayadayim. The rule is, Chachamim made a gzeira, that anything holy, extra holy, with Hashem's name, makes your hands tummy. Why? Because if it wouldn't be tummy, people would store truma with it, because this is holy and that's holy. And the problem was that if you store truma, which is bread, it attracts mice. When it attracts mice, it's going to eat the svarim, the holy svarim. So in order for people to keep a distance between the truma and the svarim, they made a gzeira that we learned this earlier, that the svarim are not just our tummy if they touch the truma alone, even if they touch your hands make the sefer tummy. So the ritzua, the straps, are holy because they're attached to the tefillin. When they're attached to the tefillin and you touch the ritzua, then it makes your hands tummy. But, so ritzua is a tefillin, ima tefillin, if they're tied to the tefillin, mitamis is a yadayim, then they make, if you touch them, your hands become tummy. But if you just have a roll of tefillin straps, let's say even they were once upon a time connected to tefillin, but now they're not, mitamis is a yadayim, then it doesn't make your hands tummy because they're not connected with the tefillin. Now we're not so worried. We're only worried that they'll eat up the tefillin, their mice. Okay. Rabbi Shimon bar Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, even more than that. Even when the straps are tied to the tefillin, if you touch them, you don't become tummy. We're only worried if you'll touch the bayis, the actual tefillin, what we call it tefillin, the bayis, the box of the tefillin, because then if you put the truma with that, there'll be a problem. As long as you know that if you touch the bayis itself, you become tummy, you won't come to store truma with it. Rabbi Zakkai Mishmoy Oimer, Rabbi Zakkai, obviously not the father of Rabbi Yechanan, later Rabbi Zakkai, said in the name of Rabbi Shimon even more than that. Tord achayiga b'mezuzah atzmo. He says, no, as long as you don't touch the parsha of the tefillin, your hands are tord. And when people will know that if you touch the parsha of tefillin, your hands become tamei, that'll be enough to keep the truma distant from it. Although if you don't touch the bayis, you won't become tamei, it's just a siman. It's good enough that people know that if you touch the parsha, that makes you tamei. So what do we see? That what was the nickname he used for the parsha? Mezuzah. So the Braisa here could use as a nickname for the tefillin parshas mezuzah, and when it says klaf for mezuzah, it means for the appropriate mezuzah, which means the parchment in the tefillin. Fine. Says the Gemara, 1 second. You have a nice pshat, but you have to read the whole Braisa. And if you read the end of the Braisa, you can't say that. In the Sefer it says, klaf kedei lichtei v'lov parsha ketana shebetfilin sheishma Yisrael. That brisa itself continues and says that klaf is the size of parsha shebetfilin. So it's talking about tefillin later. It's talking about klaf later as well, but it's talking about tefillin later. So when it says earlier mezuzah, it means mezuzah. So we have now a question in the brisa itself. In the Reisha it says klaf like a mezuzah, and in the Sefer it says klaf for tefillin. Fine, but don't tell me that mezuzah means tefillin. The brisa separates mezuzah and tefillin. So we need another explanation. What did the brisa mean when it started off klaf for mezuzah when it's for tefillin? When the brisa itself says it's for tefillin. Says the let's read it again. B'amida katani sefer klaf kedei lichter v'lo parsha ketana shebetfilin shehi shma Yisrael michlaf. From this we see the Reisha of mezuzah atzma. The Reisha is talking about the actual mezuzah askinon. Says the Gemara, you're right. So now you see that the brisa needs explanation. Let me start explaining the brisa. Let's read the brisa slowly. Klaf v'duchsustus. Add a few words. Shiurim bekamo. What's their size? So the brisa starts explaining. Duchsustus, the last option that I brought. That's for mezuzah, the size of a mezuzah, 2 parashiyos. Klaf, which that's made for tefillin. Now, if it's very well, I mean, in today's day, they would say it makes a lot of sense because many times you have that from a similar word, you like skip. So it said klaf v'duchsustus bekamo. Duchsustus said again, kedei lichter v'lo mezuzah. So then it was recorded from one duchsustus to the next was skipped. Good, that would be a way that they would explain it today. But that's what the brisa means. You have to add those words. Klaf duchsustus is like the title. So what's the size? Duchsustus for mezuzah, klaf for tefillin. Okay. Now that we spoke about, so we came to the conclusion from this brisa that the right thing to use for a mezuzah is duchsustus. The right thing to use for tefillin is klaf. And our assumption is that that's the only thing which is kosher. That's our assumption. Right? So now let's see if we stick with that assumption. So now we're going to have a quote of Rav, which will change lots of things. We'll try to figure them out, and at the end we'll come to some conclusion. So let's see. Amar Rav, duchsustus areike klaf. Duchsustus and klaf are the same din. Ma klaf koisvin of tefillin, av duchsustus koisvin of tefillin. So till now we assume when it says klaf for tefillin, only klaf could be used for tefillin. No, you could use duchsustus as well. What about the other way around? We don't know. Right now, let's assume that mezuzah could only be written on duchsustus, but tefillin can be written on both, which is a bit puzzling because if you can write tefillin on duchsustus, so then why is the smallest size for duchsustus like a mezuzah? Let it be the size of tefillin. Okay, we'll see. Says the Gemara, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, klaf k'dei lichtei parsha ketana shebetfilin shehi shema Yisrael. So, what do we see from here? 1 second. From the fact, what I just said, from the fact that the Mishnah says that the smallest size for klaf is for Parsha Shema. I understand that the chsustus is not. Really, it's more clear in the Brisa. We're quoting the Mishnah, but really we're relying a bit on the Brisa. That's what Tesis says. The Brisa says clearly the smallest for klaf is Shema, like the smallest parsha in Tefillah. The smallest for the chsustus is 2 parshas, like in mezuzah. If you can write tefillin on the chsustus, so if I carry a piece of the chsustus, the size of Shema, I should also be chayiv. It's useful. Klaf in the chsustus why? Only klaf is so small. The chsustus we have to have larger. How come you could write tefillin on the chsustus? Says the Gemara mitzvah. The proper way of doing it is klaf for tefillin, the chsustus for mezuzah. And therefore, we don't assume that you're saving the duchsustus for mezuzah, for tefillin. So if I carry a duchsustus, it has to be the size for mezuzah. But if I did write tefillin on duchsustus, I'm yaitza. It's kosher. That's what Rabbi is saying. The proper way is duchsustus for mezuzah, klaf for tefillin. But if you use duchsusis for tefillin, you use. Says the Gemara Toshma. Halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Tefillin ala klaf mezuzah al duchsustus. Tefillin has to be written on the outside part of the parchment, and mezuzah on the inside part of the parchment. Klaf v'mokim basar. You write on the klaf, you write on the inner part, the part that's closer to the flesh, the inside part, and duchsustus v'mokim seir, the inside half. You do it on the part that's closer to the ear. Basically, both of them are on the cut. You write them on the cut. Yeah? So we see again, halacha l'Moshe miSinai, that's what you're supposed to use. Says the Rabbi in the mitzvah. The halacha l'Moshe miSinai said that's what you should do l'chatchila. But if not, it's still kosher. Tani, we're going to learn in a brayso, shino b'zeh b'zeh pasul, that if you switched a mezuzah on klaf on a tefillin on the chsusus, that's a simple way to understand this. Then it's possible. Says the Gemara, no. Bazel doesn't mean tefillin on tuchsusus, mezuzah, and klaf. It means two details mentioned about mezuzah. One detail is don't write it on klaf. Another detail is write it on the inside, on the outside actually, like on the cut, on the part of the tuchsusus which is closer to the ear. Those two details by mezuzah are essential. If you wrote the mezuzah on the inside of the duchsustus, on the part that's closer to the flesh, or if you wrote it on klaf, it's possible. But if you wrote tefillin on the duchsustus, it's okay. Again, that's the way we're holding now. And that's how this brayso won't be a contradiction to Rav. Let's see inside. Says the Gemara, idi mezuzah. When it says bazel, it doesn't mean tefillin on the chsusus, mezuzah, and klaf. It means the two details of mezuzah. V'ha de kasvina al klaf v'mokim seir. Oh, 1 second. Okay, let's say if he wrote it on the klaf, on the outside part, you would think, since I'm writing it on the right part, on the outside part, on the part that's closer to the ear, that's where, if I would take the half which belongs to mezuzah, I should write it on the cut, which is closer to the ear. I went even closer to the ear. I took the klaf, I wrote it on the outside part where the ear is. Maybe that's okay? No. That's not okay. Inami or duchsustus l'mokim basar. If I took the right half of the parchment, but on the wrong side, on the part that's closer to the meat, those two are possible. But if I wrote tefillin on the duchsustus, I'm fine. That's one explanation. Inami. I'm sorry. V'ibay seima. Shina bazel tanoyi. You're right. Take back this pshat. Shina bazel means if I wrote tefillin on the duchsustus, mezuzah on klaf, it's possible. But there's another Tana which says that it's kosher. And now follows that Tana. So again, Rav said that if you write tefillin on the duchsustus, it's kosher. That's what we think now, we said. We found a brayso seemingly saying the opposite, saying Allah Chalamesh, we see that each has to be on the right thing. Tefillin on klaf, mezuzah on the duchsustus. And it finishes off if you changed both, it's possible. So either we could say both means something else, two details on mezuzah, or no, it means possible. But someone argues, and Rav holds like the one who argues. Who's that? The Tanya like this, the brayso which says Shinu bazel possible. That quote, that if you change both, it's possible. Rabbi Acha machshir mishum Rabbi Achi bar Chanina, v'amrina, and some say mishum Rabbi Aki bar Chanina. So there's some Tana, Rabbi Acha in the name of Rabbi Achi bar Chanina, Rabbi Aki bar Chanina, which says that it's kosher, and Rav follows that opinion. So either bazel doesn't mean mezuzah on a tefillin on the duchsustus, or there's a machlokes tanoim where Rav follows one of the opinions. Fine. Says the Gemara. Fine. That's that. That's one explanation. Rav Papa Omar, I found another brayso. There's another brayso which fits with Rav. Yeah? What's that brayso? Rav the Omar ketana dvei menash. Tana dvei menash kisavo. We found a brayso, a piece of paper. We don't know what it's referring to. Kisavo, he wrote it. We don't know what it is. Ala niyar on paper, ala matlis on cloth, psula. Ala klaf on the outside half of the parchment, ala gvil on full parchment, val the chsusus on the inside half, ksheno. Whatever you wrote on, it's kosher. So Rav follows this opinion, and ksavo, we're going to translate that it means the parsha of tefillin. Slosh in the cave, because we called it before a mezuzah or a parsha. So the parsha of tefillin can be written on either one, on gevil, klav, and luxus. So we have a brayso which fits with Rav. Hold on 1 second. Rav said you could write tefillin on the chsustus. Why did he choose the chsustus? Why didn't he say gevil? Because he can't write tefillin on gevil. Even Rav agrees that gevil is possible for tefillin. If you take the full cloth, the full parchment, undivided, it's possible for tefillin. If that's the case, this brayso doesn't fit with Rav. So Rav can't take this as a support for Rav. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Ksava, or we have to reread the brayso. The brayso said it didn't say what it is. You're telling me tefillin. Hold it. It can't be. Say 1 second. Ksava ma. 1 second. So, first, Rav Papa is explaining himself. I will prove to you that this brayso is talking about tefillin. Because ksava, he wrote it in Lashon Nekeva. So it would mean he wrote it either a parsha or a mezuzah of tefillin, or a mezuzah. Sefer Torah is ksavoy. He wrote the Sefer Torah. So the only two options we think we have is tefillin or mezuzah. So let's try mezuzah. Ksavamai, what did he write? If you tell me mezuzah, aklaf mikasvinon, Rav just said half. You could write tefillin on the chsustus. He never said the other half. He never said you could write mezuzah on klaf. So mezuzah you cannot write on klaf. If you cannot write mezuzah on klaf, this brayso is not talking about mezuzah, according to Rav. Because it says you can write it on klaf. So it's not mezuzah. Fine. Elolav, it must be tefillin. Because it can't be Sefer Torah, because then it would say ksavoy. It must be the parsha, the mezuzah of tefillin. He wrote it on klav bil on the chsustus. Says the Gemara back 1 second. Did Rav ever say you can write tefillin on the gevil part? You can only write it on the klav or the chsustus, not gevil. Ella, so cancel it out. Kitanya hi b'Sefer Torah. It must be written about, speaking about Sefer Torah. Now, how could it be ksava? It has to be ksavoy. So, 1 second. Let me just see if he explains it over here. 1 second. How do we explain how it's going on the Sefer Torah? I'm not sure. I just saw the explanation why we thought it's tefillin. But how would we explain on Sefer Torah? Sometimes we say it could be in the Torah. In the Torah itself, sometimes it says Sefer Torah Azeh or Sefer Torah Azois, depending if it's going on the Torah or on the Sefer. So maybe ksava means the Torah. Kitanya even Sefer Torah. Torah is supposed to be written on gevil, but if you wrote it on klaf and the chsusas, it's kosher. So you have no raya to Rav. So Rav Papa wanted to bring a proof to Rav from this brayso of Tanat Vei Menashe, but it doesn't work because it says gevil and tefillin can be written on gevil. The truth is we have a problem with the early explanation also. Because Rav Acho, in the name of Rav Ochi or Rav Yaakov, said, Bozeh is kosher, which means tefillin on the chsustus, mezuzah on klaf. And Rav only said tefillin on the chsustus. So Rav will have to explain machshir in one of the cases. Fine. So it's not so smooth. Fine. So Rav Papa wanted to bring a better brayso, but it doesn't work because it says gevil. So we're trying to figure out what is Rav basing himself on. Says the Gemara, I have another brayso, maybe that could help Rav. The brayso is trying to explain why that idea that you cannot change from a lower kedusha, a higher kedusha to a lower kedusha. So, 1 second. 1 second. So, tefillin is considered a higher kedusha than mezuzah because you write 4 parashiyos by tefillin, and therefore it's more holy than mezuzah, which only has 2. A sefer Torah, which has the whole Torah, is more holy than both. Now, what happens if you have old tefillin, let's say a tefillin shalosh, and you want to cut out the bottom half, Shema and Vahoyim Shemoya, and make a mezuzah out of it? No. Tefillin is more holy, you can't make a mezuzah out of it. What if you have tefillin shayat, not tefillin shalosh, the one that has one long parchment? Or what if you have an old sefer Torah, and the Shema happens to be written on the bottom of the page, and has a long parchment on the bottom, and you want to write Vahoyim Shemoya over there and use it as a mezuzah? Or you want to cut it out and use it as a tefillin shalosh parsha? No, because sefer Torah is more holy. Now, 1 second, they're all written on different parchments. So how would you think of cutting out a sefer Torah for tefillin or for mezuzah, or tefillin to mezuzah? You can't do that. Each is written on a different type of parchment. This is on the gvil, this is on the klal, this is on the chsusis. What are you talking about? Le'yom Esayel. Maybe I have a brayso supporting you. The Gemara there spoke about the fact that you cannot use a tefillin shalosh for tefillin shalyat, because tefillin shalosh is more holy and has the shin. It's more holy than tefillin shalyat. And then it says similar to that, tefillin shabalu, all tefillin, v'sefer Torah shabara, bala, all sefer Torah. Ein neisem mezuzah, you cannot make a mezuzah out of it. V'she'ein meridim kedusha chamuru kedusha kala. You can't lower its level of kedusha. 1 second. Time with the ein meridim, it's just because you're lowering its level of kedusha. Ha meridim noisin. If you would be allowed to lower the level, you'd be able to make from a sefer Torah mezuzah, from tefillin a mezuzah. The ksiva amai, what is it written on? So the only solution I'll find is lab the ksiva the chsustus. And we already said this brayso earlier that a sefer Torah could be written on the chsustus. And then Rab holds that tefillin is kosher on the chsustus. And therefore, for most of them, you can make a mezuzah. Mezuzah has to be the chsustus. That's what we didn't argue until now. Mezuzah has to be the chsustus must be. So you can have a sefer Torah which is written on the chsustus. You can have tefillin which is written on the chsustus. And then the old one can be used for a mezuzah, and that supports Rab. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Look, no, I have another option. The chsiva ala klaf. I could explain this whole brayso if it's written on the outside part. Says, wait 1 second. Umezuzah klaf mikasvinan. Rab just said you could write tefillin on the chsustus. But the other way around, he didn't say. It sounds like everyone agrees you cannot write mezuzah on klaf. You want to know? I have a clear brayso that you could. Hey, 1 second. It says, I have a brayso. Ksava, if you wrote the mezuzah ala klaf on the outside part of parchment, on paper, on the matlas, and the cloth psula, Rabbi Shimon Elazar, no. Rabbi Meir hayakoisv ala klaf. Not just it's kosher. He would do that. It lasts longer. So you definitely something kosher. Okay. Now I have a clear brayso, more than everything else before, which I can't translate otherwise. There's a clear Tana which says that mezuzah can be written on klaf. 1 second. Let me call back those that reported the statement of Rav. What did you say? What did Rav say? Tell me the words that he said. Oh, the words were like this. The words were klaf and the chsustus are equal. That's what he said. The one who heard it assumed he means to say tefillin can be written on the chsustus. Really, he meant to say the exact opposite. Mezuzah can be written on klaf. That's it. No, tefillin cannot be written on the chsustus. Mezuzah can be written on klaf. That's what he meant. And therefore, he exactly was saying the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Shimon Elazar in the name of Rabbi Meir. That solves all issues. I have a clear brayso. I don't have to explain anything. All the braysos can be left the way they are. And I have a clear brayso saying that mezuzah can be written on klaf, according to one opinion. Rav holds like that opinion. And therefore, the brayso which says about the old sefer Torah and the old tefillin also holds of that opinion. And the sefer Torah can be written on klaf, and tefillin obviously are written on klaf, and then a mezuzah is kosher with klaf, and therefore, if not for lowering the level of kedusha, you could use an old sefer Torah for mezuzah, and an old tefillin for mezuzah. Says the Gemara, Now that you have the best brisa ever, a clear brisa which clearly says mezuzah can be written on klaf according to one opinion. Okay, let's go back and restate what Rav said. The Rav Nami don't explain when he said they're equal that the chsusus is good enough like klaf. Say the other way around. Say the other way around. And that's the conclusion. Rav meant to say that you could write mezuzah on klaf. And that's why today that we only have klaf. They don't make duchsustus and they don't make gvil. Everything is just they take the skin and they shave a lot off from the bottom and they just smooth it a bit from the top. So basically you have the top half. So you have only klaf. So everything is written on klaf and it's kosher. Why aren't we looking to make it the mitzvah min amuvchar aloch l'moshe misinai that we should make gevil for Sefer Torah and the chsustus? We should learn how to do it. I don't know. Well, the poil from Yomi Rishonim, no one ever tried to do it, and they just said no, it's kosher. It's kosher that could write everything on klaf, and we stick to that. We stick to that. So.
The reason why they don't separate it is because it's a special technique. You don't cut it, you make a slot and then you pull the two sides and it peels itself. We don't know how to do it because you have to treat it in a certain way. So when you do it this way, you basically, the one where the hair is stays the same, but the other one is falling apart. So they say, forget it, we'll take it off.
Okay. So basically, the Mishnah says that the minimal size for klaf is for tefillin, the smallest parsha of tefillin shema. That's what it's used for. There's a brayso that all of a sudden says klaf and the chsustus from mezuzah. We don't know what it's saying. So the conclusion is like this. Read to the end of the brayso. The brayso says klaf for the smallest parsha of tefillin. So there's missing a few words in the brayso. The brayso is saying klaf and the chsustus for mezuzah, which is two parshas, and klaf for tefillin. So I'm sorry. To summarize. Let's just say again the differences. Yeah, there used to be three parts of the skin. They used to prepare the entire full piece of skin into a type of parchment that was called gvil. They would then tear it apart in half, and then the outside part where the hair was called klaf, and the inside part where it was closer to the meat was called the chsustus. And Allah Moshe Sinai was that you write Sefer Torah on gvil on the full parchment, tefillin on klaf on the outside part, and mezuzah on the chsustus on the inside part. Right? Says the Mishnah, based on that, klaf, the outside part, you measure it by the smallest parsha of tefillin. Says the brayso, based on that, if you have the chsustus, you measure it by mezuzah. Came Rav and said a statement, klaf and the chsustus are equal. For some reason, we assumed he means to say you could write tefillin on the chsustus. The problem is, if you could write tefillin on the chsustus, so why does the Mishnah and the brayso both say that you measure the chsustus by mezuzah? I mean, the brayso clearly that you measure the chsustus by mezuzah. If you can write tefillin on it, measure it by smaller measurement. It's already insignificant. You can write tefillin on it. The shema, no. Mitzvah min hamuvchar is to write mezuzah on the chsustus and tefillin on klaf, and therefore tefillin on klaf, not on the chsustus. So if you have the chsustus, you'll save it from mezuzah. Okay, but then there's a brayso which says aloch l'moshe misinai. Again, mitzvah min hamuvchar. But there's a brayso which says that if you change it's possible. It means only two details. If you wrote the mezuzah, when you write each on the klaf and the chsustus, you have to write it on the slit, on the part where it's divided. The klaf closer to the meat and the chsustus closer to the hair. So it's trying to tell you if you wrote the mezuzah on the opposite side of the chsustus, or if you wrote it on the klaf, even on the proper side, on the outer side, on the hair side, it's possible. But what about the tefillin? It's still kosher, even if you wrote it on the chsustus. That's one option. Or there's a Tana which says that machshir, after the brayso quotes that if you change both, it's possible. He says machshir. So we're going to learn that machshir means only in one case. Tefillin on the chsustus. It's not so smooth, but that's what we wanted to accept. Says Rabbi, I have a better brayso. A brayso which we don't know, it's like a cryptid brayso, just one quote. It says if you wrote it on Gvil, Klaf, or the Chsustus, it's kosher. What could it be? Could it be mezuzah? Rav just said that tefillin can be written on the Chsustus, not the other way around. So it can't be mezuzah. So it must be tefillin. So 1 second, tefillin can be written on Gvil? I wonder why you can't write it on Gvil. So it must be Sefer Torah. So you have no proof for anything. Okay, fine. But we have another brayso which says that if you have an old Sefer Torah, an old tefillin, you cannot use it for mezuzah. If you have the Shema on the bottom and you write the mezuzah on the bottom, or if you have from the tefillin Shal Yad when you cut out the bottom half, you can't use it for mezuzah because you're lowering the kedusha. But it's written on different parchments. Sefer Torah on Gvil, tefillin on klaf, and mezuzah on the chsustos. Okay, we already know that Sefer Torah can be written on anything. Fine. But tefillin? So we see that tefillin can be written on the chsustos, and let's say we're talking about Sefer Torah and tefillin written on the chsustos, and they want to make from it the mezuzah. So it supports Rav. Says the Gemara, no. I have a clear brayso which says that there's an opinion of a Tana that you can write mezuzah on klaf. And not only that, for technical reasons, he preferred that. I guess although halacha Moshe Messina is mitzvah ben hamufcha, but I guess already in those days they didn't do the chsus to such good quality, and therefore he said technically today, practically the mitzvah ben hamufcha is to write it on klaf. So we have a clear Tana which says that. If I have a clear Tana and I have a brayso which is unclear, I'll fit it to the clear brayso. And I'll say that the mezuzah can be written on klaf and not tefillin on the chsustos. And therefore we'll be talking about tefillin on klaf, Sefer Torah on klaf, and you want to use it for mezuzah. So let's call back those that recorded Rav's statement. What did Rav say? Rav said that klaf and the chsustos are equal. So we assumed it means, and he said one way. So we assumed he meant that tefillin can be written on the chsustos. No, the other way around. Mezuzah can be written on klaf. And then we have a clear brayso supporting him, and everything's fine. And that's what we rely on today, that we only know how to make klaf, we don't know how to make gvil or the chsustos, and therefore we basically use klaf